get the meetings started because we've got quite a busy agenda today. So I don't want to lose any time. Quite a few new faces in the room that I'm not overly familiar with. So should we start with a round of introductions on Cllr Dudd, the chair of the HR committee of government?
Mark Jefferson, digital HR manager.
Jones from Legal Services. Steph Griffin, Director of Workforce and Change.
Good afternoon, I'm James Brownson, Head of Human Resources.
Cllr Bailes, Employee Engagement and Communications Manager.
Councillor David Wilcoxon, please report. Rob Butler, Lead Safety Rep for United Union.
Paul Shiley, Newson, Branch Health and Safety Officer, whatever else I can do that way. Councillor Joss Clark, Brislington West Ward.
Councillor Richard Ellie.
Terry Bells, Hartford, Willingwood.
Cllr O'Rourke,
Cliftonwood. Councillor Peat, Avonmouth and Lawrence Hoston.
Anna Gilligan, Deputy Services Officer.
Cllr Housing and Practice Services.
Right, thank you everyone. So you're not expecting a fire drill today, so if there is one, please vacate the room and head towards the cathedral. I think that's still the selling point, isn't it? Just move on, apologies for absence. I had a last minute apology from Councillor Drone Thomas this afternoon. And so I don't know, maybe Councillor Tim Wise potentially running late, I assume, so I won't put that down as an apology yet. So move on. Declarations of interest. Is there anybody that needs to declare any interest in relation to the agenda today? No? Okay. So move on to minutes of the previous meeting. Obviously, we need to confirm that's accurate. So is there any points on accuracy?
No, I was just going to propose it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We've got that. We just have to double check. So we've got an action tracker. So I don't know if you, is there anything, Steph, that we need to pull out from that that's not been done or is in progress?
Yes, we updated the sheets ready for the papers, so many items are completed and we've been scheduled in for today's meeting or for a next meeting wherever we're on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So given that, are we happy to agree the minutes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So now move on to public forums. We've got up to 30 minutes for this, and I've received statements and questions today. So we'll begin with statements. So we've got a statement from Dan Ackroyd. Obviously, we've all seen a copy of your statement, Dan, so if you want to summarise it, we've got about a minute. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There was a clear quid pro quo here that the state of the housing department was kept secret, provided a large benefit to one of the parties in the election. It was also of benefit to the mayor, who was appointed an OBE in the King's New Year's Honours list. A mayor being given an OBE for services to local government when the council was failing to run the housing department competently is an obscenity. As is a totally unexplained retroactive regrading when the director has failed to run the housing department adequately and then further failed in his duties by withholding that information from the elected members and the public. If the law about how senior officers are awarded pay was written, was written explicitly to prevent what looks like has happened here.
Thank you, Dan, for your statement. I did have one from Councillor Tim White about pensions, so if he does turn up within the public forum, I'll allow him to speak to that. We'll move on to questions. So I've got questions from yourself, Dan. Have you received the responses? So you've got a couple of supplementary questions if you like.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask those?
So, two supplementaries. My first question was not answered. I asked very precisely which part of the pay policy that was active at the time allowed the chief executive to do the regrading. I can see the relevant part during the subsequent year's pay policy, but for the year in effect, I cannot see which part of the pay policy that was active at the time allowed for this regrading to happen. my question was precise. Can I have a precise answer, please?
Is that something you could further elaborate on now, or should we get you back? Can we get back to you in writing? I don't know if it's something-
I'm happy to
Yeah.
respond to that. I think the point that we were trying to address is that the chief executive, as the overall manager, can agree to a re-evaluation process. So that isn't set out in the pay policy statement, but applies that he is the manager of the individual affected. But
Okay.
the actual implementation, if there's a regrading or an increase in salaries, sits within either the terms of reference or selection committee or the human resources committee.
Okay, my precise question is which part of pay policy that was active at the time is being relied on here?
It's not specified in the pay policy statement.
So the answer is it's the head of pay, in that capacity of the head of paid service, they've got the right to do that, so it's kind of separate to the pay policy.
It's because he's not taking a decision on implementing a change in pay. It's a process of re-evaluation. The outcome of the process may be that there is no change in salary.
Okay, thanks. Do you have another supplementary, Dan?
Yeah, let me just have a moment to think about that answer. I guess my second supplementary then is, if I've understood the answer just given, that the regrading wasn't actually in the pay policy of the year that was in effect, and it only got added in a later pay policy. Is that a correct understanding of the situation?
I think like over a period of time, some issues do come up. I think as obviously I wasn't on the HR committee, but over a couple of years the policy was amended to better reflect the real world situation, and I think members at the time, I can't remember exactly who was on the committee at the time, asked for further clarity to be added to the pay policy going forward. So I think that's why it's become more strongly worded in subsequent pay policies, because members of the committee have asked for that to be added to the pay policy to make it more transparent, I guess. But I don't know if members that have been on the committee for a number of years might want to.
I think, Chairman, well, Paul and I have these, but I think you hit the nail on the head.
Well, I think it's just a point of disaggregating the pay policy and the regrading, because regradings happen, and this wasn't the only regrading. I mean, I've known them several times when jobs change and they're regraded, and that's done by an independent body, and then the new pay policy is, it's applied. So, and I think the answer here, I know that I asked at the last meeting for us all to be written to with clarification, and I certainly know that the answer that I gave supports the answer that's been given here. So I don't think there is any, there's nothing covert at all in the chronology. I was keen to understand the chronology, and thank you for providing us with that. And I think that the regradings happen. I'm sure there are some going on at the moment. And what will happen is an independent body will assess the role, decide if it's to be regraded or not, which is what you've said, Steph. Then if they are regraded, and it's more probably going to be higher, isn't it, or community level, but then they would be put on a different level and then they would have a different pay salary. I think it's quite a simple process. And, procedurally, it's written up correctly.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Dan. I'll move on to the next one. A few questions from Councillor Cllr Bailes. I think you can give the written answers. Do you have any follow-ups? Yeah.
It's quite remarkable that under the Greens, executive director salaries have almost doubled in just over a year. This costs more money than we would have saved by closing museums and sacking all the lollipop people who signed off on creating new positions.
The senior staff, how many executive directors there are, is the responsibility of the chief executive head of paid service. So it's their decision in consultation with the leader of the council. So it's not me or this committee that decides the structure. So I think it might potentially be a good question to put to full council, maybe for the leader to give his view on, rather than it being a question that this committee can answer. All we do is set the rates of pay for senior officers. How many there are, that's a matter for the chief executive.
And how many are on a temporary contract will make a massive difference, and the cost of those temporary contracts will make a massive difference. I know Sketchy, nodding her head over there.
Right. So I think you've got another supplementary if you want to ask one, but no. Sorry, if you don't have one, that's fine. All right. Okay. So that's the end of the public forum. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wood.
Joe, I've come in after public forum. I've just been in contact with him and said why he's had a family emergency and the
Right.
apologies, please.
Okay. No problem. So we'll record these in project. Thanks for that. So we'll move on to public forum. So we've got trade union forum now. So we've got a statement in from Rob. So I don't know if you want to speak to your statement, Rob. So everyone's seen what you've said. So if you can summarise, I mean, it's a short statement.
Yeah.
Want to summarise it?
Yeah. It's, I was trying to keep it short and sweet, but it's basically, as the first part of it says, that Uniting Unison are going to be surveying our disabled members to find out their experiences of reasonable adjustments in the council, good or bad. Unfortunately, I've been involved in a number of cases recently where it is bad. I can, I'm not going to do too much detail, in areas where a team leader has said to an employee with rheumatoid arthritis that their reasonable adjustment working from home can't go on for any longer than a year because there might be a cure in that time. So that's the level of understanding, in some areas of the council. So the final part of that statement is that, I'd like a commitment from Bristol City Council to actually resolve these outstanding cases that are ongoing at the moment, because I've asked questions of different areas and not really had any support on it. The individuals themselves are very, very close to breaking point. It's difficult enough for them as it is. So I'd like to get some resolution on that, and any further reasonable adjustments are actually given the attention and priority that they deserve if we are to actually support disabled employees as the council claims.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your statement. I'll bring Richard in afterwards. So obviously this issue of reasonable adjustments was highlighted when I think it was at the first meeting I chaired. And then obviously we've had a programme of rolling out training to managers. And I can't remember exactly the number of managers that took part, but I remember it being at a very high level. So there might have been a few that missed it. So I guess my concern, sort of talking to referring it to officers, is interested to see if that training's had an impact, and overall we're much better. And the cases you raise are just some rogue managers or whatever, or people that didn't take part in the training, or actually we need to come back to the drawing board because that rollout of training hasn't worked. So I guess we need to. I don't know if James or Seth are aware of the cases that you read. Obviously, we don't want to discuss individual cases here, but I'll be very keen to understand if it's just a few isolated cases that we need to get on top of, or it's something more widespread. My understanding also is that there's if someone's not happy with the outcome of a review, there's a process that they can go through to appeal against it. I don't know the full details, but I also wonder if that process is being used as well to appeal any decisions that aren't sort of acceptable to individuals. I don't know if you know that's taking place.
I do know one of the cases that is sort of close to going down grievance route over it. But yeah, I definitely think something needs to be revisited over all this, because it's absolutely gobsmacking, to be quite honest. Some of it's been going on, I've only been involved for about a few months, whereas one case's been going on for years.
Right, I'll just bring Richard in and I'll let Steph come out.
Largely agree with the approach you outlined, Chairman. I certainly think it's valuable that you're undertaking your staff survey. Then I do think we need, without detail, perhaps individuals' privacy being exposed, we need some offers of distillation of that, because certainly a number of us serve on employee dismissal appeals. I know obviously a fair proportion of the ones I've sat on, Joss and Pete and Zoe, have also sat on, and other members, relate to how effective reasonable adjustments agreed have been. And generally, we're breaching confidentiality. Our findings in those cases have been both, we found them acceptable, and also the member of staff did not criticise or challenge it at that point. So certainly it does require the basic information being distilled by our officers.
Steph, did you want to?
Yes, thank you for your statement, Robin and Paul. And obviously, any specifics we'd be really happy to have a follow-up conversation with you about. But we would also be really keen to learn the findings of your survey. Obviously, it's about improving practice within the workplace. And as members of the aware, as the Chair described, we had a whole item on our disabled colleagues, I think last year. Since then, we've refreshed our reasonable adjustment policy, our guidance and our training. So we have made clear to the managers what their responsibilities are in terms of properly implementing reasonable adjustments. Of course, if there are cases where that's not happening for any reason or where more support is required, we have introduced an escalation route where they can raise concerns confidentially via HR colleagues. And we also have a disability wellbeing advisor who can give some very specific advice and support the employee and manager to come to a resolution. But we still have live today a specific group that's chaired by James, which is in relation to reasonable adjustment delivery. And that purpose of that group is to look at the progress we are making as an organisation and look at how we might overcome barriers. So we're certainly very welcoming of any further feedback of how that's actually working in practice, because we want to continue to improve.
Yeah, I think we please do come back, but we want to have a back and forth on this.
Yeah, I just want to.
Yeah.
I sit on that group, as you know. It's alarming to me that so many people are coming back and they're saying that their managers have said HR is saying. And I don't know who is it HR is saying there, but they're using HR as an excuse, and it is an excuse. It's not a reason. It's an excuse for not putting something in place. We know that we're going with the social model. And that we go with, well, if I think I'm disabled, I'm disabled. If I need a reasonable adjustment, I'm the best person to ask. And they're not saying that. You know, for instance, I've got a colleague who's been told if they see her walking downstairs again, they're going to come on and say, I believe that's now been resolved, but that is still not really appalling behaviour from an actor, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I have actually tried to raise it with HR. In each one of the cases, and I've actually got emails where the advice that came back via the wellbeing advisor was in contradiction to what our policy says. So, and I've also sat with the head of the relevant service, and so here I am.
Well, I'll be happy to receive some information on that. We can pick that up outside the meeting.
Thanks for that. Yeah, obviously you need to work out whether it's just some isolated incidents or actually our general approach needs a refinement.
I think there might be specific services.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Paula, you also let me.
I've got one other thing that's literally just come up this week. I asked HR last week about trade unions having a slot at the corporate production sessions, going back to what we used to do, we used to take a slot, you know, to give us the dates, we'll work it out between the three TUs. And I've been told that there is a capacity for trade unions to have a slot, because the staff-led groups have a slot, and they put signposts to the trade unions. Now, I'm actually quite concerned that, and I fully appreciate all the hard work staff-led group, but I am concerned that they're being given a high priority in the trade unions and are, you know, I'm trying to think of the phrase I want to use, but I can't think of it. I think we need to be given that access to that, those new employees. I'm really quite shocked by that. I've asked for that decision to be revisited.
Undermined is the word.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I feel that we are, you know, we're being pushed to the back of the pile.
Right, thanks.
Can I say this is the first I've heard of this?
Right, okay.
So I will take
Can you
that
do
up.
whatever you need?
Yes, I will in the development department look after the induction.
Yeah,
So if you could pass on the correspondence on that.
I will send you back the full email trail.
Yeah.
I was unaware.
Sorry, I got the notice.
Yeah, thank you very much.
About an hour ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I literally opened the email I this morning. It's literally just come out this week.
Okay.
So it was actually quite concerning to me because we always used to just turn up, you know, Trevor turn up.
I imagine it's part of collective agreement that you've got.
Oh, yeah, we are the people that get there. Yeah.
Sorry, James, did you want
I am aware of the issue, which I would be grateful if trade union colleagues would give me the opportunity to resolve matters before bringing them to this council.
Okay, I think we'll move on that note, but yeah, I guess that's a reasonable point to make. Right, so where are we now? So we'll move on to item 7, which is the work programme. So the next meeting is actually quite a while away, 3rd of February. We've got, at the moment, we've got 3 items on the agenda. So I don't know if anybody feels like there's a subject that we should be discussing that programme did.
Is this like a free for all, you can just make suggestions?
Well, it is called the work programme. If you're not happy with something that's on there, you can make a suggestion.
Something that was raised in the previous HR committee was that when we look at equal pay stuff, it doesn't take into account agency workers that are being essentially who are working for the council. So I was wondering if we could do something around that, without looking into how the pay of agency staff.
Well, we've got an item in April on pay gaps as a dashboard item, so it might be information that we can include in that as part of the discussions potentially. Councillor Wilcox, did you
No, Chair. I wonder if we could actually discuss the action sheet on page 17 and 18, because it seems to have missed off the agenda.
that was part of the minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, we did.
sorry.
Sorry. Sorry. Anyone else?
Sorry, can you
Yeah.
just clarify the answers? I mean, we've got a pay gaps. So is it some information about agency staff?
Yeah, so for example, if we're employing someone who's working in a care home, but they're not technically a council employee, they are essentially hired through an agency by us, then they're technically exempt from the pay gap reports that we've had previous. And so obviously they're a minimum wage employer, and I just want to make sure that agency staff, they don't have to be for care homes, it could be teaching assistants, it could be anything that's through an agency staff, but we as an employer benefit from them being on agency. I want to make sure that they're either A, getting a living wage, and B, that there are no wage gaps based on protected characteristics.
I defer to colleagues as to whether we would have access to that level of information about our agency.
We certainly know what agency workers are being paid. They would never be paid anything less than the rate for the job as evaluated by BCC. There may be occasions where in fact they're being paid more than permanent workers as a reflection of the market for retaining agency workers in that line of work.
So I think the issues around the diversity element. So are we, is there a disproportionate?
I think I would still, I think I would still like it to be in writing as well, just because I'm really sorry, I just don't believe you.
Okay. Well, we need to trust our officers. Right? It's the right information.
The information you've just been given by the head of HR about our policy around what care agency workers.
Okay, yeah, please send it.
But I will very happily put that on the agenda for PC.
Okay, so that, but I think that could be subsumed into the April dashboards and pay gaps. Is there anything that stands out in agency?
Could I just add quickly, I think so it's very brave you use that word, as you use them, because when John Walsh you were here, he actually sued a member who suggested that, and myself as well. He did actually settle outside the court.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, personally, I think that's a appropriate thing to say. I think we should trust the integrity of our
I
officers.
apologise, and it's not to say that you're lying, I just really want to...
You want to see it in writing? So,
in writing.
So this has been an ongoing conversation for many, many years, this one about the agency and not being included in the data. So this has been going on for a very long time. So if we could get that data, it would be fantastic. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we can deal with that. So any other items? I know potentially Tim White wanted to maybe have an item at some stage on pensions. So there's potential changes coming down the line around pooling the pension funds around the country and what impact that might have on benefits that are due to staff. So it might be one, maybe not for the next meeting, but potentially one we can have in April. So,
Chair, can I just
yeah.
quickly, the 28th of April, can I just remind everybody that is International Workers' Memorial Day?
That is
International Workers' Memorial
Okay.
Day that day.
Well,
So I'm really glad it's on the same day.
So we might be able to do something around that.
We do, well, yeah, I will be sending out appointments at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So just to add, Chair, we've now got the memorial tree outside the front of City Hall, so
Still got ribbons.
yeah.
All right, thank you everyone. So yeah, spent a bit more time on that than I expected. Move on to item 8, the paid policy statement. Steph, you on this?
Thank you. So, as members will be aware, we chair HR committee have the responsibility to consider and make recommendations to full council in relation to the annual pay policy statement. Just to note, it's coming earlier in the year than normal. We normally look at this at around December time, but due to the meeting cycle for this year, it's being considered a little earlier, which does mean that we've got a gap in the figure around the real living wage because we're waiting for the announcement of what will be for next year. The pay policy statement was written and published in line with the Lawful Act and guidance. The key part of the publication is regarding the ratio between the highest and lowest paid employees. And our current policy is that the pay of the highest paid employee should be no more than 10 times that of the lowest full-time equivalent paid employee. Now, although we abide by the guidance, which is very clear what we mean by employees, i.e. those who have contracts of employment in Bristol, the main policy therefore does exclude agency workers and interims. However, as Councillor Clark has mentioned, this has been an issue over sort of a number of years and been an area of concern for members previously. And so last year, in response to that feedback, we addressed that by adding an appendix to the pay policy statement, which does give information on agency and interims, and that does give the ratio from highest to lowest paid if we were to include agency workers and interims, which also speaks to the fact that sort of what our lowest pay would be for agency staff. So what you've got in front of you for consideration today is in the same format as last year. We make reference to interim and agency pay, and as I say, we have that appendix. We've put in the most up-to-date figures that we have as of today. As I said, the real living wage figures we think are being announced later this week, so we'll update that close to the date that the report would go on to full council. But the snapshot of, as of now, we see our ratios, the highest to lowest is 8.11 to 1, and the highest to median is 5.31 to 1. So we are well within that 1 to 10 ratio. And actually, from a little bit of benchmarking, it does look like we are amongst the lowest when compared to other core cities. Just briefly then on the appendix, as I said, that's the new document that we introduced last year. We also include that same ratio calculation, including those on interim contracts. But it also gives a very detailed overview of the procedures that we have in place for the hiring of interims. Whether they're covering chief officer roles or anybody on a day rate that might be equivalent or higher than that we might pay our directors. And again, the current ratios here are within that 1 to 10. So now, quick overview, thank you.
Thanks, Steph. Richard?
This should be our ventures, of course. I'm pleased by the innovation with the development of interims, which was made last year, which allowed myself and my group and I think councillors to bid for it for the first time for 7 years. It seems to paint a picture which is equally satisfactory that we're moving, keeping in the right direction, so it has my full support.
Thank you. Anyone else on sides? I'd just say it is a little bit, Stefan, it is a little bit of an unusual situation. We've obviously got live information in there, because normally this document does come later, so probably slightly different to the report that goes to the full council. So I just want to say, I don't think it will be massively different, but is there a way of keeping us up to date with the figures before full council?
Yes, I mean the very living wage we assume will be an increase and therefore that ratio will come down, but yeah, absolutely, when we have those figures we can recalculate and we'll give some written briefing note to committee members just so that we're up to date.
Thank you. Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Chair. Some of you might know I'm a Green Party whip, which means I've got access to the forward plan for the full councils. And the pay policy statement is due to come to full council in March 2026. Is that the expected timeline? You did say it was accelerated. I think it's
So it's come early to this meeting.
come early to this meeting, but it won't be coming early to full council.
No,
Sorry, I misinterpreted.
yeah, sorry about that. It's because we had to, originally this meeting was in November, scheduled for November. It clashed with Remembrance Sunday. Remembrance Day, sorry, not Remembrance Sunday, that would be a clash. That issue was highlighted, and we kind of decided that it's better to move it, and this kind of was the date that works for everybody's diary, wasn't it? So it's a story behind it.
Just for clarity, so the members' briefing would be sent to us prior to papers being first published.
Yes, if that's preferable. So as I say, we've got holding figures in there at the moment until the real living wage new value is announced, which is normally October, I believe. So as soon as we have those, we can go in and update those figures and send it to you by email.
And I guess if there's a massive difference, we can always
Well, exactly.
deal with it.
We have a February
Yeah, so we
meeting
can deal with it.
to bring it back.
Sorry.
Can we get some information of how other benefits factor into it? So, for example, I know that with agency workers, they're not necessarily paid holiday in the same way that a regular employee is. So So for example, if you are a teaching assistant, your actual wage will technically be higher, but that's because you don't get paid during what would be considered annual leave. And so I just want to make sure there is clarity on whether or not they're actually paid higher, or whether it's because it's pro rata essentially.
So I believe we do in the appendix reference how that figure is calculated, but we can certainly take a look at that and offer further clarity.
And I guess the other kind of issue with the agency pay is that there's kind of less on costs associated with agency, so we're not paying a pension for them, are we? So they have to deal with that. So hence they would get a higher day rate than someone directly employed. Or paying for their salary might be low, but if you take into account the overall costs, it might be about the same. And that's something we've never really quite mastered, is it sort of reflecting the total cost of an employment.
Yeah, so sharing appendix 7, the policy statement, 13 kind of statement calculation in relation to that, and how we take account of those pension contributions, national insurance contributions, the expense of those agency fees. So it's just relied on comparisons, and that's the same calculation that's used in our annual accounts as well.
Right, so any more on that item? Are we happy to recommend that to full council? And obviously if anything horrifying comes forward in that note, we could obviously bring it back for further discussion. I think I have to take a vote on this one, don't we? So all those in favour, please show. So that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on now to the staff survey results. We've got a very comprehensive presentation pack that's been sent through to us. You can't complain about lack of information. But I think you can give a bit of an overview, Laura, is that right?
Yeah, I won't go through it.
Have we seen this before? Have we seen this data before? Recently?
No.
It was published in September.
Oh, right. Is it the same? Very similar. It's the same data.
It's the same data, so it's the results of the staff survey from this year.
Well, we've not discussed it in this meeting.
Okay. Well, but I've seen it previously now. Did it go on posters? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking it looked incredibly familiar when I looked through it again. Okay, sorry.
If I could just clarify, so when the results were published for our staff colleagues, the Chief Executive also wrote to party group leaders and I believe the HR committee with a copy of the results as well. So that's why you've seen it before, but this is the first time it's been submitted this year.
So you get to scrutinise it then. Thank you.
Yes, so I'll just focus on some of the key headlines and our next steps with the results. So the questions are split into 7 themes, and wherever possible each year we keep them the same so we can compare each year. So with regard to this year's results, we've had the highest response rate to date with 56% of colleagues, which I think is a strong indicator of the engagement we've got from colleagues. We've done more this year to increase participation, including with our online offline colleagues. So this includes posters and paper copies of the survey at different offices and workplaces. We went to see parks teams to support them with completing the survey. And this was an open invite as well to all offline teams, to the heads of service and managers, to increase that engagement there. There are 3 particular questions that we focus on to measure our employee engagement. So 80 to 88% of colleagues said they are clear about what the council is here to do and its priorities. So that's the highest result we've had since the survey started. And then 80% of colleagues believe the council is committed to creating a diverse and inclusive environment. And 74% of colleagues would recommend the council is a good place to work. Again, that's the highest result we've had since the survey started. So overall, the results are showing a positive sentiment. We have seen a reduction in neutral and negative responses and improvements across some of the key areas. So
Me and my team is generally a top performing team, so we've got 79% of positive responses. And as I say, we see this regularly each year. So colleagues are answering that they feel part of a team, feel they work in a collaborative way, and understand what their team needs to achieve. Quite similarly to me and my team are the themes me and my role and me and my manager. So again, the responses to these are pretty high each year, with questions around colleagues understanding what's expected of them, receiving positive recognition, feeling that managers are approachable and communicate with them effectively, some of the highest positive responses in those areas. So this year we have seen a positive shift in how people feel about senior leadership. So this theme is generally got the highest neutral and negative responses across all the other themes, but positive sentiment has grown for questions around senior leaders' communication, the maximum integrity, and listening to colleagues' views as well. The theme that has seen the greatest improvement this year has been the organisation theme. So there's been positive shifts to questions on themes that changes, reasons for changes well explained, and recommending the council is a good place to work. And there does remain a high positive response to colleagues understanding the council's priorities and values as well. So just referring back to the me and the organisation theme, what we do see is that colleagues don't always believe that meaningful action will be taken in response to the survey. So this year we have 35% answering positively to this question. So to address this, we've ensured that colleagues, or we will be ensuring that colleagues are aware of what steps we're taking next. So directorates and divisions are using our interactive data dashboard to explore their own results, so you can break down into different service areas and divisions, and they're coming up with actions that can be taken in response. And these actions are going to go to corporate leadership board and will help inform our organisation-wide actions as well that will be taken forward, and will be communicating that out to the workforce as those actions are decided on. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Paula?
You've given me a real pause for thought there when you started talking about your offline workers. And then I had to think about what that actually meant. And I'm supposing it means somebody who doesn't work with a computer or very good at all. And you say that you are making every effort to get them to fill in the service. I suppose I have sort of two questions. One is, have you got data? Is there data that I should have read somewhere that says what percentage of people who are online answering it and what percentage of people who are offline answering it? And then when I was thinking about that, then it did make me think, and this is quite a cynical question, excuse me for asking it, because over recent years, and you're talking about tracking it through, over recent years, you know, when we've had things like, you know, we sort of outsource the FM contract and stuff like that, is that factored into change in statistics in any way? You can see where I'm coming from with this. So if you've got a lot of people who are offline and are not answering the survey, how are we dealing with that? And is there a direct link between that and increased satisfaction? So that, you know, I don't want us to be complacent. What do you think?
I'm not sure we're able to draw those conclusions directly. In terms of those who are offline, every effort is made to reach them, so that will be they can fill it out using their smartphones. So we have posters up in depots and kitchen areas, so they would still fill it out electronically, but so we're just trying to find different ways.
They would be then online.
They would be, but in addition to that, we do have hard copy versions, so we write out to each of the managers. Obviously we know who've got offline staff, and we assess how many copies they need. We have a free post envelope, I believe. So we will know the difference between paper and online, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to differentiate how many of the online are sort of technically offline in their work facilities. We want to try and make it as easy as possible to do that, so we give them a QR code to be able to answer it.
And are the paper ones that come in an envelope, are they assessed separately?
They're uploaded by business support services and then incorporated into the online responses.
But you don't know, I mean, because I'm just going down maybe a bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm suddenly concerned about the fact that, you know, it would be nice to know what the people in the depots and all that, if they feel differently.
So we can do that. So there will be, I wouldn't have it to hand today, but we will know how many hard copies we've had back versus online, so we can provide that data. But the other thing is that this is a static set of information that is published, But we also have an interactive dashboard using Power BI, which all colleagues can access. So that's published on our intranet. And you can go in and you can drill down to a particular area. There's obviously, we'll only go to a certain amount before we go into people being not anonymous. So I think, is it less than 20? Less than 20 people. So we can't drill down to teams of less than 20 so that we're staying within data protection rules. But perhaps say certain areas like parks where they've got, I would have thought, a lot more offline stuff, we can go in and have a look at their data and compare that to the rest of the organisation, and that's exactly what we've asked managers to do. So we can look at that, and we ask managers and directors to do that very task.
But would you be able to tell this committee what the difference between the online staff and the offline staff, how they feel about the survey?
We could do that. We'd have to do that offline after today to actually look at that data.
Okay. I was even going to say maybe for the next survey. I think it is an important. It seems to me like an important thing to know. You know, and I think, you know, as the data is coming in, surely you can write something in the programme that says, you know, tell me this person joined us, and then be able to know the merchant. AI can do everything now.
Thanks, Paula. So we've got Councillor Richard A, and then Councillor O'Rourke, and then Cllr Bailes.
All right. A couple of general points. First of all, right, I leave this a little later, though possibly colleagues may take up the issue. Firstly, the turnout, the take-up is impressive actually, and so are many of the actual positive developments. I'm sure historically we asked the question why we had the dip in take-up 2 years ago. Can you remind me, did we have a view why that was the case?
Probably have to refer back to the report, I think, from 2023 to remind myself about where that was. I think we've done a lot more work in the last couple of years to get out and about as well, as I was referring to offline colleagues. That may well be helping with that increase, but I can certainly have a look at the report from 2023.
And talking as all of us about drilling down on written boxes, do we know how many respondents are regular or can be finite, or those people who are new to the survey?
So the survey is anonymous, so it makes it very difficult to be able to, obviously, you can't attach people's data to the survey. One of the questions we've got in there is the length of service, so we can have a look to see if somebody's been working for the council for longer than a year, less than a year, then how do they feel about it? Sentiment from that.
The final thing is, there's more point than a question. The fact the information is here in the way it is probably reflects that housing is a new directorate, exec directorate of rules. But personally, I was quite disappointed with my housing hat on to see that it's 10% less than adults and communities. I personally feel that's incredibly poor, and I'm minded after this meeting to actually email the policy committee chairman and the exec director to flag up the issue for how we can encourage take-up next year. Could you possibly send me the results? I'm sure housing would have been not an exec directorate, but a directorate. Can we find take-up for the last couple of years so I can see the historical picture?
Is that just for housing, just to
Yeah.
clarify? I think we did a directorate report for housing. Actually, we pulled the data from GNR as well,
Right.
so we can see what the data's been in the last few years. So yeah, I can show that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Chair. Just for context, how many employees does Bristol City Council determine to be offline employees in percentage terms and numbers, please?
I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody can make
I
sure.
don't have that data to hand, I'm sorry. It's a smaller percentage, but
We are doing some work in my team with regards to mapping offline audiences as well, so that's kind of a piece of work in development. I know we can look at the IT side to see how many people have got Office 365 licenses as well.
That'd be
So-
one way of doing it, yes. I'm just interested in the context because this is 2025 and the 21st century, we still have employees who don't have regular access to email or things like that. So I'm really interested to find out how they actually work. Okay, if they're carpenters, that's not their main job to be looking at email, but they do need some facility to actually integrate with the rest of the way the council works.
Sorry, is it on the back of this? Is
So
it?
just on the back of David's comment,
Okay.
which is I assume obviously they'll get an email to their personal emails with pay slips and stuff, but I imagine the council, if they need them to work a specific day or anything like that, they'll be going to text or WhatsApp.
They shouldn't be taking this as a personal email, they should have their own email account. Everybody in the council should have an email.
I don't disagree with you.
you don't send information to person.
Okay.
We're not employees as such, we are councillors, but we do fill this survey. So we get sent in, is that right? We fill it out, so when we're filling it out, are we filling it out because our managers are officers, but it specifically asks, that's what it looks like. And I don't know if it's this survey or whether I filled in another sort of survey which asks about our roles. Is that added recently or is that a different survey?
This is just for employees only.
I'm not sure we got some. It might be. I think there's something that went out recently about how much time it takes you to do your role and stuff like
No,
that.
it's not that long.
No.
Because I get sent, I'm sure I get sent this to fill out.
No, you wouldn't. You're not an employee.
That's something you're not telling us.
Chair, can my point be question be added to the action sheet?
Yeah, about how do we deal with people that don't have access to technology? Was that on that point, James?
Just to confirm, Chair, that all employees have the Bristol City Council email address. The issue is how much access they have to utilise that address. So I would describe quite a number of workers as being, rather than offliners, they're more edge of onliners, i.e. they do have access, but it's not ingrained within the type of work that they do. So that there are some areas where we need to find ways of integrating technology better into their day-to-day work.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, in relation to pretty much all of those points, actually, including housing, is that I'm aware that one of the worst areas, shall we say, for being able to access things is sort of like the response repairs area, because they have these handhelds, they get scheduled jobs and things, but they do, as far as I'm aware, have email addresses, but it seems to be, and I won't go into too much detail because discussions are taking place, that if they don't use them very often, so coming back to they don't get the time to be able to use them, they get locked out. And so they then got to take the time to try and get their accounts recovered and all that. But it's not just with the survey side of things, it's things like method statements for actually doing jobs, which is,
Okay.
so the access thing is a problem.
So I think we've identified a potential issue.
February meeting, I just put my hand up
Yeah, I
to say
think we've
we should be
identified
able to.
how do we deal with people that aren't connected as
I think there are so many questions that are a bit nebulous, the answers at the moment. We don't quite know what the whole offline thing means and who those people are. Most importantly, it's lovely to read the survey, but if we can't actually, disaggregate who the workers who are out there and what their views of it are, So I would suggest that maybe for the February meeting, some sort of, you know, maybe just a discursive paper or something that we look at. Offline workers. How many they are, who they are, what do they think, how do they get their emails? There's loads of things we don't know.
That's obviously, you know, we've got a policy of a one council approach. So how do we affect that when people aren't as connected as other people? So I think it's probably something to discuss. So did you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm finished. Yes, so when you're talking about senior leadership, overall effectiveness and practice, does that include us as councillors or cabinet members or chairs? We're not included in this at all. Because I think sometimes that's how the public interpret we lead the council, we are responsible for everything the council does. But
so we include it in the slide deck, but we're really clear when we were filling it out that by senior leaders we mean heads of service directors, executive directors and chief executives.
I don't want this used for the public to beat us around the head. We're not doing a good enough job, because I'm sure there are people that think that, but some of us might disagree. But yeah, at least to make that clear.
I think we asked a question around awareness of how the political system works, the committee system works, but that's really just about awareness amongst our employees. We don't ask them for their opinions on
So is that a new thing, or has that always been in there? And is there a difference between the previous government model and the committee system?
Yes, it's been in there for a while, and we revised the question and we changed from our own model to committee system.
Just on the accessibility of the surveys, obviously my only experience is as a councillor, so we've been given the Lenovo ThinkPad, we've got the two-factor authentication and our password changes every 3 months, all of these very secure ways of making sure that anything that we work on is very secure. How many other employees are subject to this level of, or in degrees, because that can make it difficult. If you've been given, password and it's changing every 3 months, you then use your email or phone or whatever the council's giving you, then you're less likely to see the survey as well. So I just wanted to know, if there's an issue with accessibility in terms of accessing the survey through council technology.
So for people who are sort of in depots, for example, Sandy Park and Parks, they've got posters up where they can access the web link, which you can use on your personal mobile or personal laptop. And there's briefing notes that go out to managers and heads of service to make sure they're talking to their colleagues to ensure they know about the survey. We also put an invitation out to heads of service and managers to say, if you want us to come to your workplace, then we can come and sit with you to go through the survey, either for a paper copy or we can fill it out forward on our laptops, which we have, that's something we've been taking on before.
So somebody who looks after the parks, for example, they might not necessarily have someone there as a specific office, they might be told to go to this park today, that park tomorrow, so forth. You're not necessarily going to see a poster on a tree. So how are we making sure that the people who don't have one specific location of work, how are they accessing it?
So referring to your park example, I think that there's 2 depots, I think north and south, and we went to both of those this year. So heads of service invited us to go to the depot, and then we were helping the park teams to fit out when they were there in a break, lunchtime, or in the morning before when they went out to do their work. With regards to, again, we offer websites head of service, but there's definitely more we can focus on to try and make sure that we're engaging with other colleagues offline. I think that piece of work we're doing around offline colleagues will really help with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've just got a question. So there's a few sort of questions. Name one thing that you can improve about council, or what's working well. And the kind of answers that have come through are quite general. I imagine within the responses there are probably some really good ideas that have come forward that
Yeah.
No one else has thoughts of it. Are any of those being taken forward in any way, or how have we kind of responded to like really good ideas that come forward that might be outside of the box?
So these are group topics of themes. So yeah, we did get thousands of free text responses. So we've gone through those and selected the themes, and then each directorate has been receiving the free text reports, so they then can look at those. Certainly from an employee engagement perspective, we're putting ideas out for our future communication strategy and also incorporating it into the workforce strategy action planning as well. I think there's definitely some good ideas in there that we can, work with directorates about to see how they might be able to feed it into the action plan. But that's part of the action plan that they need to be doing as well, which they're doing at the moment.
Yeah, I guess you could probably be more specific, but you wouldn't want to identify an individual via the survey. So you could have a question like, name one thing that would make your job easier or something like that, but then you end up identifying who it is. So
I think with the free text this is a little bit, sometimes people use names, etc. We just make sure that we go through those and make any deletions that we need to.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Anybody else on this item? No, well, thanks for your time and the report. Probably see you again next year. Right. So, well, item 10 now is the workforce strategy action plan progress update.
That's me, thank you. So the workforce strategy was approved in the summer by Strategy and Resources Committee. And we are now working with colleagues to create a more detailed action plan that will sit beneath that strategy, and that will really set out the tangible actions we're going to take to be able to achieve the commitments we put in there. We also include the performance indicators that we will use to be able to measure our progress. So we've got some focus groups coming up with trade unions and staff-led groups for their input on this draft action plan. And HR committee previously have been able to give us their steer and input on the strategy itself. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to give us your steer and input into the developing action plan. Once we've approved this, then what we can do is bring you this as a sort of progress update to future committees, so that as a committee you can get a sense of how we are progressing in terms of implementing. So this is a working document. We've organised it by the 4 priorities in the workforce strategy. Within each priority there are 3 objectives. On the left-hand side are the list of the commitments we've got in the strategy, just so that you can see the read across between the commitments and then the proposed actions that we're going to take. So it was really a discussion item to gather any feedback on what we've presented.
Just one question initially. Can you give us some timeline when it will be completed?
So we've got focus groups coming up in the next few weeks, and we will be taking the final one to corporate leadership board. We're aiming for November. So by the time we get to the next committee meeting in February, we will have an improved action plan. We can bring you a progress update.
Productivity is a little buzzword at the moment, isn't it? And I can see that a lot of the strands and the aims and objectives of this document are to improve the workforce. But is there some way that you could answer the question about productivity in the sense that how does this plan for improved productivity and how do you measure it?
Okay. I think it is difficult to answer or to quantify. A lot of the actions in here, particularly in priority 4, which is about preparing for the future, is around making sure colleagues are equipped with relevant digital skills so that our processes can be implemented more quickly. Also through this we talk about how we might be improving some of our own internal processes, such as our recruitment processes, so that would make it a better experience for the applicant, but also for a hiring manager. We would hopefully improve the work that's involved in the processing within that. So these will be sort of slivers of productivity that will improve. I'm not sure we can specifically answer the question on.
No, but I mean, surely we should be able to, because there is, you know, and I've come across, we said this in previous HR meetings over a decade past. A lot of the work seems to be about, you know, developing an improved workplace environment, and this is absolutely. But the other side of that coin is about productivity. And I don't know that we ever get the focus on that correct. Because you should be able to go, and certainly, you know, we should have the technical and the facilities to be able to measure. Well, first of all, you know, if we can't decide how to measure productivity, or what productivity looks like, or who is productive and who isn't productive, I think we're dropping some balls. And I think that there should be a focus. There should be a real focus on that. Because as an organisation, I mean, I think we would all know that there are variable levels of efficiency that we would just anecdotally feel about different departments and individuals, which obviously we mentioned. But there should be some accountability, and I don't think that this committee is accountable to the productivity of the organisation, because we don't do it.
Probably a couple of other comments have come in on. In terms of holding people to account and being clear about efficiency and productivity, obviously there is a twice-yearly performance review that a manager will do with each employee, so that's really where they would look at that at a kind of direct level. They will set objectives for the year, both personally or for the team, and that will be assessed as part of the conversation twice-yearly review. And we've got actions in here about really improving the uptake and making sure those are happening.
You're driving me to my next pet subject, which you know is about
performance management. And we have got a specific action on that. The other point I just want to quickly make is that we do have a performance framework with a number of performance indicators within that would be indicators across the organisation of our efficiency or productivity measures. So it obviously will vary from team to team, but there will be certain measures such as planning targets, for example. So those would all be organisational measures of how productive we are as an organisation.
I still feel that this needs to be more clearly delineated. You know, I was talking to somebody recently who works for a bank, and this person was saying, oh, you know, things are going this way and that way, and I don't have all that much of my projects are not going all that well, and she's not working that hard. And then she said, but of course the thing is, my productivity levels will be down and it'll come back to bite me. And I just thought, I mean, would anybody in the council say that? You know? So how do we know what the productivity levels are? That's what I'm coming from, really. How does somebody know? And even with the performance management, I don't know whether all the way up the chain there's a complete analysis of are those targets. I mean, of all of those targets, which of them are met? What standards are met? Which are completed every year? Do we have all of that data?
So we do in our key performance indicators in the performance framework. So those are brought to each policy committee every once a quarter. So there will be a set of performance indicators that officers have to complete. So that would be an indication of productivity.
I know, but aren't performance management, you know, the set targets, do 3 targets a year or whatever, aren't they very private between the manager and the team leader or whatever?
Yes.
So how do we get a straight line of accountability down to say that person is working for that line manager and they know that they have met their targets, or they've met 2 of their targets and it's ongoing, that's perfectly reasonable. Is that followed all the way up?
It should be, but you can take that away and take a look at that.
Yeah, I just feel that we should know more about it.
Yeah, that's Zoe.
So I'd like to, I have like my own point, but I suppose I want to come a little bit on Paula's as well, which is that I suppose if you use your friend at the bank's scenario, I suppose the difference is with like a very specific company such as a bank, KPIs are going to be a lot easier to measure because there is a one unified kind of focus, which is to make money for the bank.
Short in bank. Sorry.
But
so it's a general job.
It's a general job, but the council is fundamentally different. There are lots of different roles. You can have anything from someone who's a housing officer to somebody who, cuts trees and stuff like that. And so I suppose what I'm saying is that there's no one size fits all for determining performance within a council. I think it could be helpful to, instead of focusing on the employee level, focus on the team and then try and set KPIs for different teams. And that way, that might be a way to determine productivity, because I think it's so difficult to determine productivity for one person in a company or the council where there are so many different employees with such different vast varieties of work. Sorry, that's just what I want to say on that point. The actual point that I wanted to make was about these kind of four overarching goals. Back to KPIs. How do is the staff survey the only way that we are measuring the success of these different things, or how are we measuring the success of, say, priority 2, we will maintain and we will support colleagues to maintain good mental health? Like, are we just kind of basing this off the staff surveys that will come in next year, or do we have other ways of measuring how that's a success?
Thank you. So on the very final page of the document are the draft key performance indicators that we would use to try and measure this. In relation to the mental health one, what we will be looking at there is health and safety risks. So we have that as a risk managed register, we can see that coming down. But absolutely, we will be looking at the data that we receive back from colleagues through the staff survey as well. So there'll be a range of measures that we would use.
Thanks. I'll just come in on a couple of points. So just on the priority 2, becoming an employer of choice, that's quite an interesting one, because what an employer of choice is, it's probably changed from like 10 years ago. So what we were offering 10 years ago, is it still good enough now in terms of the flexible working, the job security, the pension? Is that what people want today? So it's good to see, and I assume there's going to be some benchmarking and research which is referenced here in terms of have we got maybe our non-paid offer correct kind of flexible working. That'll be interesting to see what comes forward from that. I think the other thing that's missing is probably, we've mentioned it before, around the physical office space or workplaces that we offer people in terms of the quality of physical workplace. So I think that's probably been missed. And I think we probably need to set a minimum standard for what we offer as either an office space or a depot space or whatever it may be. That probably needs to be in there in the plan. If it's not, I might have missed it.
Well, it is because in a different priority.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, we've got that under objective 3.2. There is a bit of overlap.
Okay, sorry.
So that's under the objective
3.2.
Yes, champion lead workplace equity and inclusion to ensure that colleagues feel treated fairly. And we've got the final one, which is welcome workplace developments and projects to ensure that accessible needs of colleagues. And I think we do talk about just the workplaces. Yeah.
So I jumped the gun.
No, it's important.
It's also good to see the focus on apprenticeships, which I think they're doing very well at. And if we can do more, that'll be fantastic. And there was one point to slip my mind if you stop at me. But I'll move it to someone else want to make a point on this. So, go on, Caroline, I'll probably remember what I was going to say.
It's the next, it's not packet, it's the next papers. It talks about building trust, and I think there are a lot of controversial things happening within the council, and as politicians, we kind of meet the public, and it's us they shout at, whether it's on social media or in person at meetings. And I know you do get shouting at meetings and things, but we're only relaying to the public what information we get from officers. So if we're not being given the right information, and I think we probably are, but it's how the public interprets that information, and it kind of doesn't put things to bed. I know I'm getting shouted at quite a lot about money for the youth stone, but apparently the members of the public that shouted at me are kind of saying officers are telling them directly that the budget's being cut. So I'm not aware of any budget cuts or that the money that local services are receiving is going to be cut. So I'm being shouted at quite a lot. So to build trust, I think that the information we're being given needs to be correct. And I'm not saying it's not correct, but if anything has changed, we need to know as soon as possible. So I think that's something that could be worked on, because I don't like being shouted at for something that's not my fault.
Clearly, we're different people, because I love being shouted at. But no.
It depends if it is.
The point I wanted to pick up, and it's also reflected in the survey, staff survey we've done about creating the one council culture. All of us as elected members are frustrated, no doubt, with people raising something, and it's not their fault. It's just possibly just beyond the remit of the officer they speak to, and they signpost them. Perhaps concerned that why spend some of my time pursuing this. And I personally think taking ownership of an issue, so saying, our team is the person who should contact you, to me that goes extra mile, but it's what our citizens want.
Yeah, the one thing I remembered as well was just on the focus on our recruitment processes and policies around diversity and inclusion. Because I think some figures that we've got back, especially around in terms of our proportionality with the disabled community in the city. I think partly a lot of that may be around the recruitment process. So sort of focus on that could be one of the reasons. Focus and refresh of that's positive to see.
I was just wondering if we could look at some of the bars for entries in some areas. And I know that sounds quite radical, but for example, I was speaking with some of the people who are working at King's Western School, and some of them are city employees and some of them, and this is why I've been so about this committee. Some of them are employees and some of them are agency workers. The agency workers are told that they're not allowed to be city employees because they don't have an A-level qualification, and which means that they would have to go through the apprenticeship route. But apprenticeships obviously take a very long time. Meanwhile, somebody who's worked at that school for years less has been automatically granted employee status because they just happen to have A-levels. And I think that maybe that's something that we could look into. So, if you've been working for an employer for 7 years, then you're qualified to do that job as an employee, not just an agency worker. And that's unfortunately part of the reality that I think a lot of agency workers are experiencing.
We're happy to look at that. It's whether we have qualifications is an essential criteria of all jobs these days. It is more around aptitude to do the role that's changed it to.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, King's Western School has decided not to purchase its HR advice from Bristol City Council. Therefore, I am not surprised to learn that they may not always be acting as we would wish them to act. And I would encourage the councillor to encourage King's Western School to take another look at who they get their advice from.
There you go. Some practical advice on that. Okay. Anyone want to say anything else on this? Should we move on? Yeah, okay. Can we just note that? Yeah. So the final item, we've got our dashboard item, our regular dashboard item, to focus on attendance and sick absence. So I don't think you usually Mr. James.
Thank you,
thank you,
Chair. Yes,
Sorry, just a general question. So, if they don't get the HR advice from Bristol City Council, does that not mean that it's not an attack, just helping me to understand what level of responsibility do we owe the employees if they're not getting the HR advice from Bristol City Council, but these people are still Bristol City Council employees?
It would very much depend on the status of the school. Off the top of my head, I don't know if the governing body is the I did make a note, Chair, anyway, to raise with our business partner for children's education.
Just genuinely wanted to know.
We'll see if we can get you some advice outside of the meeting. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that.
Not at all. As you say, yes, as you say, dashboard. This quarter we are focusing on attendance as absence, and given a picture paints 1,000 words, I will try to confine my words to the minimum. As you can see from the first slide, Bristol is a bar in blue. Unfortunately, the colours on the screen are not as they appear on my laptop. So the blue bar in question is towards the right-hand side, so below the dotted line, which is the average of all the unitary and metropolitan councils that have participated in the survey data that we've used for this presentation. So in a sense, that is a positive news story. We are below the average of our sector. The second slide is not so helpful in that the survey that we used has quite different reasons, or uses quite different reasons for sickness absence than we do at BCC. Ours is a lot more granular than theirs, and so we've had to do some adaptations so that those pie charts aren't perhaps as useful as they otherwise would be. Again, on the next slide, which focuses on short-term absence, and the following slide, which focuses on long-term absence, again, Bristol appears below the average for our sector, although there are a number of local councils in all cases where conversations might help us to understand how they are performing even better than we are. There is a slide, as you can see, on back problems. There's the slide on other musculoskeletal problems is one where we probably, or I will be picking up a conversation with Christine Crouch in safety, health and wellbeing, as we are above average on that particular aspect. The following slide, we are almost at the lowest, very general heading that they use for medical conditions. ditto for minor conditions. Interestingly, on stress, depression, fatigue, which we've done quite a lot of work on since COVID times and beyond, our result appears to be more positive than perhaps I might have anticipated. Still some ground to cover. There's a couple of councils in the Midlands there who are doing extremely well, so not saying that we don't have any to learn. The final slide we included following our agenda conference a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about ill health retirements, dismissals on grounds of health capability. That shows where we are for the previous financial year, so 24-25, and 16 dismissals plus 10 ill health retirements. And the right-hand side has a look at redeployment. Unfortunately, there was no redeployments in 24-25 or so far this year for those who are being dismissed on health grounds. So there's clearly some room for us to investigate that and find out what the barriers are in those cases.
Thank you, James. Very comprehensive there. Richard, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. I find this fifth one very interesting, actually, because a lot of it is how are we beginning to keep comparators. Although I appreciate you've done a mix of things like regional comparators, and also unitaries. Personally, I probably would find us compared with the core cities more helpful. I don't know whether Mark is able to use his magic in bringing that up. The other question was, are we actually comparing oranges and pears? I mean, you can only work as IT wizards like David now on the information you're given, of course. But for example, on this figure comparing average days lost per employee on short-term absence, we're basically twice as bad as Birmingham. I can't imagine. I'm surprised if that's true.
Chair, I was also very surprised at the very favourable result shown for Birmingham City Council, given all of its many challenges. And this, I think the Councillor has absolutely hit upon one of the problems with benchmarking, is that the definition is sometimes subject to a degree of interpretation. We try and stick quite rigidly to the rules that are given to us. Others may be a little more creative, perhaps. But on the Councillor's first point, I think we will go back to Infinistats and see if we can define a group of core cities. There are a lot of results in the system, so most of the core cities should hopefully be in there.
Yeah, no, it's only Birmingham that way of the core cities that signed up to the Infinistats programme through the LGA. So yeah, that was our reason for it, just including those unitaries and metropolitan councils.
But we can certainly encourage Steph meets regularly with her counterparts at core cities, and we can certainly encourage them to participate.
I just think obviously not just unitaries but big combinations like Manchester, etc., are bound to address similar issues to us.
Okay, thanks. Let me just double check who's in here. So, Joss, Zoe, was anyone else?
Just very quick one. This data is really useful because it gives us some trends. And I'm going to say it again. Obviously, Richard and I dealt with a very long-standing And I think, and I hope that this data will actually highlight where we've got issues starting to appear with individuals or departments, and that we can address those. So I think that this data is really useful for that, because obviously I know we've discussed a particular case previously. I mean, none of us want to see situations where we've got people who are surprised that they are given notice after very, very long periods of time when they just thought that they could continue with that behaviour. So I think this gives us trends within the council, which is really useful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Zoe.
So first I'd like to know what's in the water in Dudley to be so chill. But I think one thing that the beginning of this committee, we have been here talking about how can we get the most accurate data possible. And I think that's something that's a real good strength of both the officers and the councillors here, is we work really hard to make sure that everyone is represented, everyone is declaring reasons and things like that. And obviously, that's not to say that other councils aren't working just as hard to produce as accurate information, but we also need to take into account that maybe not every council is as thorough and intense about being wanting to know everything about how our council is doing. That is something that is a credit to us, I do believe.
Okay.
So on the pie charts, it says other reasons include, and it lists various other reasons, and it says women's health. Would that include things like menopause and perimenopause? And also, if somebody was a victim of domestic abuse, how would that be recorded? If they had to take time off for injury, recovery, legal action, would it be sick leave, annual leave, reasonable adjustment? Or any or all of them?
So coming back on the first question, yes, I think women's health probably would be the first port of call, or depending very much upon a particular reason for absence. In relation to domestic abuse, again, if that person is unemployed as a result of that, is affected, there will be an appropriate reason for sickness absence would be chosen. Managers do have a degree of discretion and will, I hope, be seeking HR advice so that they the appropriate approach is taken. But that may look different depending on the circumstances.
Well, it's a sort of adjacent more than directly related point, but it did make me think when looking at this. It wasn't only just to do with sickness and absence, but it prompted me to consider, do we monitor PIPs and giving people personal improvement plans, or do we do that? Do we have any monitoring of that?
We pick that up through our history monitoring. Unfortunately, our improving performance procedure is not the most utilised policy that we have within the UCC.
And what's that make you think when you say that?
It means that people are more likely to address people's attendance or misconduct than they are to pick up the improving performance procedure. I don't know the reasons for that. I could speculate. That would probably be a little bit fruitless. So I'll just leave it there.
Well, again, it's just something I put out there, but it might be another tool that is useful for driving productivity, performance, all of these things. And not the whole plan required.
There are some tools that we are looking at as part of the action plan that could lead to more conversations around performance. Because, for example, if we had a broader scoring matrix, for example, an employee would want to understand why their line manager has scored them a 3 when they think that they might be a 5 or whatever it is. So I think we could get into a realm of more discussions around performance and perhaps more policy as well.
Well, I just do think that, I think the more I ask these questions and the more the answers come back, the more I'm being forced to think that there isn't enough rigour in all of this. And we were talking, Josh has talked about this case before where dismissal, went way too far, and everybody agreed with that particular case. But are we not, surely people have been given PIPs in an organisation this size. Surely there's a whole load of, employment policy on this that people should be doing. You've given 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, this is your improvement, these are your targets, get on it and do it. And we should be able to have data that says how many people, met their targets in their PIP, or how many people left, or did all of those things that happened. I would really like to know how many PIPs were given last year, for example, and how that is being utilised, and what managers are doing it, because it's all part of this wonderful mechanism, which obviously in my little head makes everything massively better, just about performance management.
Brace yourself for low numbers.
Well, maybe that's one of the things. But if we do get low numbers, and we maybe shine a light on it, then I think I will be doing my job next day.
Thank you, Chair. One of my other roles on the council is being on audit committee, and we're interested in performance indicators and stuff like that, having presented to us. Now, I'm interested in the way that this last paper actually talks about how things are actually changing, but according to the Power BI business plan tracker, according to the way that every other director reports, there's only one section, workforces and change, which has 4 actions on it that's being monitored. I'm just wondering how this actually maps onto the data that we're being shown, so that there is some correlation to show that HR is meeting its targets.
So those KPIs sit within that division, but they are corporate targets, so that division monitors them and breaks that down by division. So it would have, for example, the average number of sick days sick, which should be exactly the same as the information we've got from FinStats and on where we've benchmarked.
Right, but just that I can't see that data on the Power BI dashboard.
Right, okay.
Plus, I might be looking at the wrong place or driving it wrong, but it'd be useful to make sure that everybody else is outside this committee is having the same data shared.
Of course, yes, it's a quarterly update that we do on all of those key performance indicators. We'll check that.
Thank you.
Thanks. I've got one myself, and it was on the last slide about the ill health retirements. Obviously 60 in the last financial year. I was just wondering, is that like a kind of a consensual process, and you get to a point where sort of both parties agree that the best thing to do is kind of accept that retirement offer, or is it something where potentially there's a number of employment tribunals that could result from that process of being with it?
I cannot, in the last 25 years, remember a case where someone has appealed against an ill-health retirement. I think by the point at which we are seeking that medical opinion, sadly, the employee's health condition is such that they have reached a point in that journey where they acknowledge it's time to move on.
So, obviously, Joss, Richard and I, we sit on, most often sit on the dismissal appeals, but it really brings into question why we don't factor in that potential role with other types of appeals. So, for example, grievance appeals, but also potentially appeals on PIPs as well. I mean, I think Councillor Cllr, she would probably welcome a more of an active role in actually engaging in these processes ourselves as well. Sorry?
So all I was just raising because it has proved to be difficult old enough to get 3 monitors for those, we'd be sitting every day.
Potentially, and I'm not saying that for the first pick or second pick, but maybe the pick is appealed, like the final decision. I mean, that would just be dismissal, I suppose. But or if just a pick was appealed, not a pick. But it would just be interesting to see a bit more of an active role in these decisions, and it would potentially put more of an onus on us to talk about performance management as well. Because it just, I don't know why we only do the dismissal appeals and not other types of appeals that.
Can I just say something? I disagree with that completely.
Okay, that's all right.
I mean, that's all I think Richard and I from this end can say, really. It would be, and it would be completely inappropriate for us to be involved in that part of the process. We get involved at the very, very end, and that's entirely
legislative and constitutional, we have a final appeal. So
that
obviously you don't deal with any stuff like that.
It should also be added that we, as an HR committee, we have reviewed this with Landlord. I think I'm correct. James will step and tell me one night that very few councils these days have members involved with these sorts of appeals. So we are pretty, if not unique, certainly in the minority.
I think the other thing that we need to say at this point is we are reviewing the process, not the content.
Yeah.
So the fact that the employee's done X, Y or Z is not a matter for our appeal panel. The appeal panel is there to review the process, and that is what we're there for. And so it's a completely different set of circumstances than the officer interaction with a member of staff in that process.
Okay, right, I think we're going slightly off course.
Yeah, we have.
Sorry about that. Anybody else got any points on sick attendance and absence? No. Okay. There are trade union disputes can be referred to us in this community. So it's a dismissal appeals and disputes. If they occur, unions can ask for us to look at that. But it's just not happened in recent years, I don't think, is it? So. Okay, before I open another can of worms, I think that's it, isn't it?
I'd just like to have a comment. I'd like to say something. I'd like to have a note. I've been on this committee for almost 10 years. And in all of those 10 years, I would like to say that generally the members and the officers have been very efficient, effective and respectful of each other. And I think that should be promoted and encouraged. I think also, civility and respect to officers must be our priority. And I think also this is the first time in 10 years that I've ever seen this forum being used to politicise HR matters. I think both of those things are reprehensible. And Chair, I'd like to ask you in future to make sure that you urge members to consider the best working of the committee.
Thank you. We've just finished that.
No, I genuinely just want to say an apology to James. I was not absolutely trying to imply that you or the officers were not doing your job or that you were being deceitful. It's just that I worry that perhaps there is data that we haven't reviewed, and that was the concern. It was not about your integrity or your work ethic. And I also apologise for the words that I used. It was just literally just I feel like there's something that we're missing, and it was not as much as it came across that it was not. And I do sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, apologise and completely agree with Cllr O'Rourke's remarks. Genuinely, I didn't mean any disrespect, and I am sorry.
Thank you, it's fine.
Okay, all right. Meeting closed. Thank you.